All righty. Good morning, everybody. I know it's awful early, but we're working on a different time schedule here. We're working on Thailand time. So y'all, that should let y'all know we're in store for a good show, not only with Mr. Roger Youngblood, our resident SKYRAIDER pilot, and Mr. Terry, our resident Hatchet Force and Pontoon vet, joining us for a really one on one between them. I'm going to kind of just sit back and enjoy it like you guys. But we're going to really let them kind of take over. If y'all got some questions, we'll definitely let them answer it. But we're really going to let them hash some stuff out and go back and forth a bit about what it was like in the air versus on the ground working in Laos. So, Mr. Terry, if you kind of like to tell everybody hello, and we'll let Mr. Roger do the same, and we'll kick it off.
Do we have anybody listening yet?
Mary Jo's in here, and
Hi, Mary
we've got
Jo.
4 other people that just joined.
Okay, good. I think I'm having trouble with no, I guess it worked. The chat, listening, the comments on the
You're
side.
you're in the private chat. You need to put your thing up back up to comments.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, Mary Jo. Um, okay, I'm Terry Cadenbach. Um, I was at CCC. Um, I didn't pick CCC. I got assigned there, and then I got assigned to the Hatchet Force. Again, there was no option. They'd had a lot of casualties, and so we're trying to build it back up. I was there from October 68 to April of 70. I left right after the camp got, I've heard people call it overrun, but it wasn't overrun because we killed them all. But at the beginning of April of 70. And I still maintain that that was an inside job. Who's going to turn all the floodlights around the perimeter over there facing up in the sky and not notice it? Come on, you know.
You got it.
Mr. Roger, would you like to give a little brief introduction
Yeah,
before we?
I was in the first tour I did was in Saigon in Vietnam, and I volunteered for a second tour because I wanted to fly the A-1, and I got that assignment about 3 weeks after I was in Vietnam on my first tour. So I went back to Hurlburt, checked out in the A-1, back through jungle survival school again, which wasn't bad at Clark Air Force Base, and then on into Nakhon Phanom or NKP Thailand, where I flew A-1 SKYRAIDERs. Terry talks a lot about MACV-SOG and the things that he was doing, and there was a dedicated A-1 unit. I'm not sure. I think it was a 602nd that was dedicated to supporting MACV-SOG during their entry and infill, exfil, and their operations. We also had at NKP, Terry might know about these guys. They were named Heavy Hook. They were going up into northern Laos and infill. We would support these special helicopters. I think the agency had 2 helicopters that were taking them up there, dropping them off in some pretty high elephant grass, and then the A-1s would hang around for a couple of hours, and if they didn't get overrun or something, then we'd head south. But they'd stay up there for 2 or 3 days, the Heavy Hook guys, and then we'd go back up there and get them. But that was sort of the same thing that MACV-SOG and the 602nd A-1s were doing over in Vietnam and Laos. But I sure enjoyed it. And like I said earlier, my hat's off to Terry. They don't get any better and bigger than those kind of guys that did what they were doing. I'll tell you that much. I just had the honor to fly the A-1 for a year as a hobo mission, which was in support of the our forces up in Laos and then over in Steel Tiger and along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But also I got the honor to fly as a Sandy pilot, which was a real good mission. That was search and rescue, picking up guys that were been shot down, bailed out or whatever, or guys like Terry that were in trouble and had to be pulled out. And, as Terry was talking earlier in his first video about the ABCCC, the Moonbeam or Kingbird or whatever, and there was a 1-star on board that could divert resources anywhere from the theater over to help out in case somebody got in trouble and needed out right away. And I can attest to that fact that is when we were doing SARS, we were told what was airborne. Like if F4s were airborne or 105s or whatever was airborne, we knew about it. If we wanted to use it, we could use it. And the fact that Terry became a ground fac and was calling in ordnance and all is right in line with the way we worked also. So my hat's off to Terry, and I appreciate this time for this interview.
Absolutely. And Mr. Terry, did you have something? Do you think you'd start off with?
People that have listened to some of the previous podcasts know how much love I have for the A-1 pilots. For us, out of CCC, if you look on the map, the distance from, like, say, the coast or whatever, a fast mover like I don't know, Raj, what were some of the F-100s?
Yeah, F-100 out of Fan Ring. And then the F4s and the 105s mainly coming out of Thailand in support. But the problem they had, Terry, like you were saying there, is they were limited on gas, and we call them one pass haul ass. They would come in and pickle off what they had and see you later, Jack. But, with the A-1, we had 3 hours of gas, actually had 4.5 with everything, but we could hang and support you as long as you needed it.
And that right there, that one single thing, the fuel, was the difference between life and death for a lot of the teams. Because, like for us, our choppers would stage at Dock Toe. Well, you might be looking at 45 minutes for them to go back, refuel, rearm, and get back out to us. Whereas while they're gone, you've still got the A-1s. And when you look at the specs on the A-1s as far as the armament, like that picture Budden showed us a few minutes ago, the amount of ordnance that was relatively an older generation plane, look at all that stuff hanging there. And you got a mixture. You got CBU rounds, you've got napalm, you've got just the guns, a little bit of everything. And when you have that kind of ordnance, there were a number of times when the FAC would ask us, what do you want? They've got everything. Well, depending on the circumstances and how close you want to get it, it might be napalm, it might be CBU. I was always very cautious because when you open a canister, Raj, how high up would the napalm or the CBU canister open? About 500 feet?
You could select one tube at a time. Now there was a triangle of 6 tubes, 3, 2, and 1, and you could fire one tube at a time, or you could ripple off all 6 tubes. The deal with the CBU is it puked it out the back ass end. It had these fins that would open, and then it spun up to a certain revolution, and say it had to go, 40, 50 times a minute or whatever. And then that armed it. That centrifugal force inside the CBU cluster armed the unit itself. When it hit the trees or it hit the ground or it hit anything, it slowed it down. And once it slowed it down, it went off. So it armed with it as it was spinning up, and then it was coming down, it was armed. And the minute it hit something and slowed down, it went off. So yeah, now this picture that I showed you here was the search and rescue bird, which we carried 6 cans of the CBU, 3 on the end of each one. Now, 2 of those cans on each end of the wing were the cluster bomb units like you picked up, Terry, and tossed.
Yeah.
They didn't have 100% expend rate, I put it that way.
Yeah, we can tell from that. Yeah, all those unexploded.
Yeah, those were picked up in Laos, maybe right around the trail where you were, and they didn't go off, and they de-armed them, of course, but they put them in their museum.
So, from being on the ground, if you're in a situation, and I don't think it would really matter whether it was a recon team or the Hatchet Force, either way, if you're in danger of being overrun, in other words, they're right up on top of you, it's a big decision on, okay, what kind of ordnance do I want them to drop, because they knew the NVA knew after a period of time that if they got right up on top of you, they're safe, because it's not likely that you're going to work anything in that close. The only thing I would definitely consider working right up on top of us would be if we were using strobe lights to mark our position and they could come in with the guns.
Yeah.
Because the guns, they could bring, I mean, right up close. I've got a piece of shrapnel in my shadow box out there that I dug out of the ground. It just barely singed my thigh as I was sitting on the ground. So how far away was that bomb dropped? I don't know if it was a 250 or a 500 pounder, but it sent shrapnel, and this was a piece of shrapnel about the size of my thumb.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have wanted to get hit with that, but if you can imagine, if you could drop that, say 100, 150 yards out from us, you're going to take out a bunch of guys.
When you had troops in contact, TIC and all that, that was very, very important that we got from the FAC. And you have to understand this FAC. He works the box or square like you talked about, Terry, and that's what he does every day. He goes out and he knows his area, and he knows if a tree doesn't look right, he knows yesterday it looked this way, or today it's different, or the road's different, or something. He knows it. But when the troops are there, like yourself, and he knows where you are, he can put us in fairly precisely, and he knows, you don't let a F4 go through there at 350 or 400 and drop 6 Mark 82s and just hope they hit where it ought to hit. It didn't work that way. But we had ordnance like the guns. We had 420s, and we could go in there and be fairly precise with that. And you're on one side of the creek and the bad guys are on the other. Well, we could work with that.
I was curious about, with you two, just speaking about what y'all were talking about with troops in contact and using the guns. At a certain point, both day and night, after you initially get either the FAC puts a white phosphorus in, or the team is on the run and has to get a signal panel up or what have you, once you get that initial heading and you pass the word along, and I'm imagining night can be a lot different. Are you guys literally, like you said, are y'all getting it in as close as you possibly can to beat off them overrunning the team? Or is it a play on if they're not too close from where the signal panel came up, we might try and drop nates or some cluster bombs or what have you?
Well, and again, a recon team versus a hatchet force, the situation's completely different. Hatchet force, when they would hit us, generally, not always, but generally, we would be on a hill, or we could be down on the road, but they're going to be a little bit further starting off. They're probably going to be a little further out from us because they've got their trail watchers and their guys following us that are clacking the bamboo or firing a single shot to let everybody know. And that's when they bring in the anti-SOG specially trained troops to we call them SOG killers. If they were far enough out and we knew there was a lot of them, that's a perfect scenario for napalm. Mm. If you only got maybe say a squad or a company that's hitting you, why waste napalm on that? I mean, yeah, you can do it, but I think a CBU, in that case, the CBU would be more effective. Now at night, Roger, when we be using our strobes to mark our perimeter, how visible was that for you guys up in the air?
Well, I personally didn't fly any night missions, but the Zorros before I got there was an A-1 squadron dedicated to night flying. I think that's correct. And they got pretty good at it. And there were tactics used because we didn't have night vision goggles. At least I don't think they did. Mm-hmm. And so, but they got pretty good. And you have to remember the NKP was kind of a throwback base. There were no jets at NKP. We had A-28s, AB-36s, or 26s rather, A-1s, O-1s, O-2s, AC-47s, gunships, stuff like that. And this was all under the command at one time of Colonel Adderholt, Heine Adderholt, who became Brigadier General and took over JustMag finally, who I got the honor to work for. But those guys were bombing the trail under what we call candlestick C-123s. It would drop these flares up at maybe 10,000 foot, and then they're on a parachute. So they would light up and drift down. Now that we light the trail up, or we light the area up, and we see a strobe, or we see an area that's marked off, I'm sure the Zorros and the A-28s could be very, very accurate at coming in. But, we just we're trying to be very cautious, especially if you're face to face with some bad guys. There's been time when I've heard stories of our guys, just like Terry says, just bring it in here on us. They're on us. Just bring it in here. Whatever you got, we'll live through it or whatever, but we need it on us. So things like that is when it really gets hairy. And
would y'all do that without a second question? I mean, I know that's tough to do in the moment.
You heard some of the stories in Terry's part one. I mean, it's really hand to hand. So when it's close in like that, and he's needing support, and there's 400 of them and 20 of him, we're listening to him. And the FAC also is talking to us. The forward air controller is out there telling us, I see them, I know where they are, and all. And the beauty of the FAC and him being there every day, knowing his sector, his box, was when he threw a white phosphorus rocket in, he would just tell you, go from my rocket south 50 meters, or go from my rocket northeast 150 meters. He wouldn't maybe throw the rocket right in on the enemy, but he would put it somewhere where you could go from the smoke. And he'd say, that's where they are, in the bend of the river. Terry talked about the Bra. Yeah, there was a lot of the Parrot's Beak and a lot of different places on the river that made physical things that you could say, okay, this is the Eld in the river right here by the bridge, we're going to go 200 meters to the north. They're on the east side of the river. Unload everything you got. There's no friendlies. Damn. And things like that, So, yeah, Terry's right.
We hear a lot of, and Mr. Terry's got, and I'll put some up about calling in airstrikes on Leghorn, because Mr. Terry was on Leghorn when the NVA either were just dumb, bored, or out of their mind and tried to overrun Mr. Terry and the guys, and y'all wiped them out. The Sky Raiders wiped them out along with the SOG guys doing their deeds. Oh God, I'm going blank on what I was about to ask.
Wait a few years.
Yeah.
Y'all go on for just a second. As soon as I think about it, I'll pop it back in. That was a great question. I just went completely blank.
So, and I've talked about it on other shows, but one of the negatives, I guess, in the Special Forces training was they were in such a rush to get warm bodies. Go ahead, bud.
Sorry about that. We've heard Mr. Terry and other guys speaking about how good y'all were, how low, slow, and all of that the birds could get, and other recon men saying they could see y'all's faces. Is that true about you Sky Raider guys? That y'all could get real low and slow?
In the early on, in '68, and those guys that were flying in support of Terry and all, their stories of coming back with palm leaves in the wing and stuff like that. I mean, there's one guy specifically at an A-1 SKYRAIDER reunion. He talked about coming back, and he didn't know he actually clipped it, but he did, and his crew chief pulled out a piece of branch out of his leading edge and said, "Hey, what's this?" But you do what you got to do. And I didn't fly in support of MACV like that, but I know exactly the mission. And we did fly in support of the heavy hook guys out of NKP up in northern Laos when they were infill, exfil type stuff. But the war changed every day. And one day Terry woke up and was doing this, and the next day you got to go do something else. But you just, I went to a MACV-SOG reunion at the New Orleans Hotel in Las Vegas a few years back, and there were 4 of us that went in there, and 4 A-1 pilots, and we just went to Vegas to that reunion. And you'd have thought that the king of some country had walked in, because that's just the way it was. If there was ever a team that went hand in hand, it was the MACV-SOG guys and
SKYRAIDERs.
and the A-1 pilots and all that could, and then the FACs too. The FACs hung it out all the time. They'd go down lower than they should have to check things out. Sometimes they drew fire and they knew it, and Terry, man, you talk about the yards and all. The Mongs and all up in Laos were the same way, the yards, and it was terrible. It's like Terry said there. You said we left a lot of people hanging, and that's a sad part of what we do.
Yeah. Talking about the load of ordnance, and I've told this story before, but we're always getting newer listeners. So in December of '69, I got assigned. We would rotate it every month. So I got sent up to Leghorn for the entire month of December. And they're like, I've only been in country October, November, 2 months, and they send me up there to Leghorn. Oh, don't worry about it. It's never been attacked, blah, blah, blah. And one of the negatives in our training was we weren't taught anything about working airstrikes.
Yeah.
How to work an airstrike. Well, so here I am. I've been in a few missions. My first mission was Hotel 9, which everybody knows is not a nice place. But December 17th, the NVA decided they were going to hit Leghorn, and the first rocket severed the coax cable for our radio and exposed all the ammunition in the ammo bunker, but it didn't set anything off. So over the next week or so, they would hit us every day, just, and looking out due south and off across the river, there was a mountain. And I, to this day, believe that they had an anti-aircraft gun on rails that they could put into a cave and then bring it out when they needed to. Well, I guess going past Leghorn was like one of the main paths for not only the A-1s, but the choppers putting teams in and pulling them out. And over time, I learned that the A-1 guys would call and they're like, we got a load of napalm we'd like to get rid of because we don't like to land with that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got the perfect place for you. And I thought, well, if they drop napalm on that mountain where I think there's a 37 millimeter on rails, the heat, if nothing else, the heat would take it out. Well, it never did. But then the one day there was this little shelf, and there was about 100 guys in the open. And it just happened to be, timing was just happened to be that a pair of A-1s was heading back from an insertion. And I guess they were either heading back to Docto or Pleiku. And they're like, would you have any use for some napalm? And I said, well, I got about 100 guys in the open here.
There you go.
End of story.
Oh.
And it was little funny things like that. We don't like to land with napalm. Well, I didn't
like to land with anything.
I mean,
that load I showed you a while ago on here with the SAR load, and if you see there was 4 rocket pods.
Yeah.
And once you expend a rocket, then you've got the Lao 3. You had 19, and the Lao 7, I think you had, or Lao 3, you had 19 and 7. You had 2 different pods there. Well, you shoot 1 rocket or fire 1 or 2. If you don't expend the whole thing, you just don't bring the pod back because you don't know if one hung up in there. And when you touch down at NKP and that thing fires off down the runway, you don't know what's going to happen. Exactly. There's been some problems like that. At Benoit, they had a problem like that at one time. But anyway, so we had a bomb and rocket switch on the panel, and we were in rockets and we're expending the rockets. And just like Terry said, I don't like to bring that pod back because I don't know what's in it. So I would flip the switch down to bombs, and as I'm coming off the target, I would just pickle the pod off and just let it do what it might do as it hits the ground and all. But and same way with the CBU. If you try to expend something, you don't know if you got all 6 tubes out or not. And just like he said, there was some that hit the ground that didn't go off. Well, you just don't land, and CBU comes out the back end of your airplane or causes you a problem. So a lot of times you just clean the wings. And if you got napalm and somebody says, where do you want it? It's good to, I always thought the napalm, and I didn't get to drop it exactly like some guys before me did, but it's a psychological thing. You come in low at 500 foot or 1,000 foot and it tumbles it. When it hits, it's good. That igniter's going and it's a splash. It's like you stand back and throw a rubber balloon or something at the ground, and when it hits, it explodes, but the splash goes forward. And that's exactly what Terry was needing when he said, bring in napalm and put it on these bad guys here. And there's nobody to, there's no good guys around, just cover them. So yeah, it was a psychological thing and it was bad news. I saw a picture of an A-1 taxiing out with 8 canisters, 4 under each wing, and there was 2 of them.
Oh my God!
Oh yeah, they were a dedicated mission to take napalm somewhere, and I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that, but that's just the way it was.
If you had, like, for instance, a recon team discovers a regimental base camp, which we've seen a few of those. Talk about a perfect opportunity for using napalm, because you got all these hooches that are built out of bamboo and dried grass and whatever. You could drop bombs on them. You can drop CBUs on them, but the napalm's going to suck all the oxygen out, and it's going to burn up everything that it lands on. Because when napalm hits,
it's goopy jelly. People don't realize it's not liquid. It's goopy jelly that sticks to you.
Well, again, the thing is the psychological effect. When fire comes covering your base, a sheet of fire comes out like that. That's a lot different than you hear something go off on a perimeter fence and it's CBU cluster or a Mark 82 going off close to your camp. But you get covered with a sheet of fire, buddy. I'm telling you, that will put the scare in you. So
we made our own napalm at our camp, at the yard camp. And you take 55-gallon drums full of gas, and then we get these, I guess they were like 1-quart cans or something of naphthene, which is naphtha. And you mix that, and that jellies the gas. Then you put to arm it or set it off, you put a white phosphorus grenade in there. And you angle them at about a 45-degree angle from the walls of your camp. And then when the bad guys are coming across the landing pad, you set that sucker off, and it shoots. When it comes out that 55-gallon drum, it's like a shotgun pellet. It widens, and it's pure jellied gas. And it's going to barbecue anything that it hits, because it's like a white phosphorus grenade. You can't put it out. It's got to burn itself out.
There's a question concerning napalm and Mr. Roger. There's a few questions. I think the next one that Jason has, will have a good talk between y'all two talking about something. Mr. Roger, did you ever use napalm to create a firebox around a down pilot or any recon team in trouble to keep the enemy away?
Well, to answer that about a down pilot flying search and rescue missions, you certainly had that. If it was airborne and you needed it, you had that available. The key to picking up a down pilot is to get in there as fast as possible so the bad guys don't get to surround the area. You know, they weren't everywhere, but they were close. You know, but if they saw if that 37 millimeter on rails comes out and hits an F4 or something, and he smokes and goes off a mile or two, and they both bail out, they know there's two guys on the ground. Well, guess what? The FAC that was putting in the F4 also knows there's two guys on the ground. He can call the position in, and you can put whatever you need to, so long as it doesn't injure the guy on the ground. You can put it in right around him. You can take the smoke and CBU and cordon off. You can drop. There was canisters that we had of, I don't know what it was made up of, but it was like white talcum powder. It was called gas or whatever you want to call it. And if that was a last resort where you would go in and brief the survivor to just lay down, and usually you'd tell him to take out a handkerchief or something and wet it and put it over his face, and because you're going to drop that powder all over the place because they're right there. And you just have to go in and sort out the bad guys and pick up the good guy and do it that way. But there's a lot of stories like that. There was some A-1 guys that I was working with when I first got there that were involved in some of that, you know. But there was a lot of ordnances available. And I didn't drop napalm in my career there, but it was available. There's a picture of it right there. And that's just one wing. So that shows the other wing. The other wing, just to keep things balanced, was probably loaded just exactly the same way. And so you got two guns and all that nape. And, you know, the A-1 would carry as much as a B-17. And so there's a picture that I'm sure Terry would love to see when he needed it right there.
God.
There's 8 napalm canisters right there.
Yeah, right there. And he's got a 300-gallon tank underneath the belly, and he's got 3 hours of gas internal. So he's looking at 4 hours of gas, and he's wanting to know where Brother Terry is. He's coming to help him.
So, Roger, when you arm, is there like a selector switch where, like, say, a switch for napalm, a switch for CBUs, or?
No, that's it. It's rocket and bomb, best I can remember, and that would just be pickled off just like a bomb. And it'll come. I got a photo. I should have brought it, of a A-1 in about a 30-degree dive, pickling off 2 napes. Now, when you deliver it in a dive like that, you're trying to be more precise than when you're going in sort of at 10 to 15 degrees. And you're skipping it in, and you want it to splash and go a long way and cover a lot of area. But you want to drop it in a hole or something, or put it in the edge of a mountain or something. You'd come in and say a 30-degree dive if you could do it that way. And it didn't matter what area, what altitude you pickle it off. It's not going to arm. It's armed once it hits and goes off. The igniter ignites the jelly, the plasma. So that's the good part about it. But you're exactly right about those guns in the mountainside on rails. You know, they also put the guns inside the watts. Up north, they would. We had the ROE, rules of engagement, said we couldn't bomb inside the perimeter fence. I'm going to call it of a watt. That's the Buddhist temple. Well, the bad guys they don't have a DROS. They don't go for a year and go home. They're there for their life, and so they're in there, and they know pretty well that hey, the good guys are not going to bomb the watt. And so they would put the heavy guns sometimes right inside next to the watt. And it got, you know, it was just kind of a war. I tell you, we had a lot of one arm tied behind us when we were trying to deliver ordnance and all, but the bad guys could do just about anything. But I'm sure that if you got that napalm or whatever close to that 37 millimeter, if it didn't suck the air right out of the oxygen right out of the air, it scared them to death anyway.
We had 2 really good questions. One from Jason that'll lead into some good stuff, but for the a good introduction, because we've read so many SOG books about and then mentioning the A-1 SKYRAIDER, and there are multiple versions of the SKYRAIDER. And we've always thought the A-1 was the single pilot bird, but as it's found out now that they've been wrong, that the A-1E was actually the two-seater SKYRAIDER. Is that correct? And the A-1H was the single person?
The H and the J were single seat. The E, which you see there in your photo, is side by side. That's 2 seats.
Oh, it is a side by side. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why they got the name Fat Faces.
Yeah, it's the pilot's on the left, the co-pilot, if that's what you want to call him, is on the right side.
Wow.
I didn't like the. Now the bad thing about that airplane, if I could say this, is if you're just flying it, and sometimes you'd get an A-1E and you wouldn't have anybody in the right seat. Well, now just think about this: you're making a dive bomb pass, and you're looking at the same time you roll out and you pickle and do your thing. You're looking for ground fire. Well, the only way you can really see is out the left side. So you make a couple of jinks, but you're going to come off left so you can see out the left side. You can't see out the right side because you're not sitting over there and you don't have anybody over there and there's no spotter. So I'm not going to roll right and pull off to the right where I can't see ground fire. I'm always going to pull off left. So I didn't like to fly in the E, obviously, you know, and luckily for us at NKP, we had a lot of single seat H and J's, but you want to talk about the aircraft and ordnance and all that, you can talk to Hook, or you got Ken that knows a lot about it. They just know that airplane A to Z. But yeah, there's your H and J model, single seat. I think that's an artist concept because it may not be exactly the bird that I was thinking about, but that's a picture that was sent to me. So, but anyway, you could carry a lot of different ordnance. And we could support the MACV-SOG guys on the ground. And, you know, it just gives you that good feeling of I'm not bombing cabbage patches out here. I'm going to help out the guys that are now. Let me interrupt. That's the time that Terry was doing his thing over there. That's a 68 photo of A-1Es and H's at NKP parked in the open. And that was before we put up those big revetments. And they started building revetments around every airplane. But they were parked in the open. But the A-1 H's and J's are the single seat, and the E's are the two-seaters. But like Terry said earlier, that's an old Korean vintage thing, but it certainly did pay off to bring it out of whatever from the Navy and turn it into a close air support airplane.
The amount of ordnance, even today, just hearing the description is mind-boggling because it was really cool when the FAC would call and say they've got a mixed load. What's your preference? Yeah. And sometimes the FAC would make the decision on what to have them drop, and a lot of it depended on, again, how many bad guys do you think they are?
Exactly.
How close are they? You know.
That's why you wanted a good FAC, you know, somebody been there a while, and you could tell. I mean, you just hear him talk to you, and the language he uses, and he cuts right to the chase of what he wants done, and he knows how to describe the target, and he knew pretty much what the A-1 was carrying. The beauty of the search and rescue mission was that we finally started taking off, and we would do airborne SAR alert. So we go out over Laos, and we're just circled, cutting holes in the air, and you got a MACV-SOG, or you got a heavy hook team, or you got anybody that's in trouble, or a guy bails out. Obviously, that's why we were airborne. We can get to the target. We can get to the survivor real quick. But after we've been on station for 2 hours, and then we're released by the C-130 Kingbird, we turned over to the FAC, and then he's chomping at the bit, you know. Boy, I've been waiting on you guys all day. What you got? And he knows what we got. We got as much as 50 to 100 passes, depending on what you want to expend. One rocket at a time. You got 4 20s millimeters. You can pull circuit breakers on 3 and shoot one gun at a time. So you could stay all day. And then that was the good part about the A-1. And I just loved it. And there's some really good guys that came out of the A-1 that did some really good work down low.
Wow. Yes, sir. Those FACs, I mean, the good Covey riders, those 1-0s like Mr. John Plaster, Larry White, Howard Karate Davis, who just passed away, were angels up above for recon guys and staying in contact with y'all. We got some good questions that I think will get some good dialogue between you guys. Jason is saying, Terry talks about how the Ho Chi Minh Trail could be as wide as a footpath or as big as Mr. Roger showed us offline, as big as a 2-lane highway. Mr. Roger, could you see the changes of the sizes of the trail from the air?
Well, the times that I was working on it, it was very definitive of what it was. And the FAC would talk about it, and the FAC would lay down a rocket, marking white phosphorus, and like I said, he doesn't have to hit the target. In fact, if he's got troops that are sitting there in a truck, he doesn't want them to know that we're coming. So he might throw that rocket down 200 or 300 meters away from the truck and say, all right, now go due east for 300 meters. Do you see that? Yeah. And he'll walk us in as we're seeing the target. Okay, I got the bend in the river. Now I got the tree line. Okay, I see what you want. Now I know right where you want. And then we wouldn't make a pass until we knew what we were doing. But as far as the trail went, there were footpaths, but you got to understand that they were running trucks up and down that trail. And I've had many guys that have come on that knew the history of the trail. And a truck driver might have a 5-kilometer path that he drives his truck, and maybe longer, maybe 10. He'll drive that truck from point A 10 kilometers, park it. Another driver will get in and take it the next 10. He doesn't have to know about the next 10. He'll get back up and somehow come back to the start point. He'll get another truck. And so a driver gets very familiar with driving his road every day, just like a FAC working a square. But sometimes if you can knock the trail out, as Terry talked about a bulldozer getting pushed out of the way and another one clearing the road. Man, they had great maintenance, road maintenance. Overnight, they could get that road back in order because that was their lifeline. The stuff coming down the trail and going into Vietnam was their lifeline. And like I said, Terry and his guys, MACV-SOG guys, coming in there and working those people over or doing what they did is just, man, that takes a couple of pair of big ones right there to do that. I'll tell you that much.
That's why we carried wheelbarrows with us. Talking about that, it's just a little side story, but and I've told it before. When I got shot the first time, we were sent in to take out what was believed to be a truck park, and it turned out to be actually a gas station. After we took care of business, and that's the one picture, because they were dealing with my bullet hole in me, that I didn't get to take a picture of it, but there was a whole wall of 55-gallon drums of diesel fuel, red or kind of a reddish orange and yellow barrels, which you know what gas company that is.
Shell.
Shell. I mean, they're marked Shell Oil Company, And again, like Roger said, they're bringing them in from Cambodia. They're offloading them on the ships, driving them up and stocking these refueling stations. And it was an eye-opener for me because I never really even thought about it. But it's like, okay, so they're bringing truckloads of 55-gallon drums. How were they unloading them? Because a 55-gallon drum is probably, over 500 pounds?
I don't know exactly, but I'll tell you one thing. You got little guys that are about 5 foot high, and they are in black pajamas wearing flip-flops, and those guys were kicking ass sometimes. I don't know how they unloaded a 55-gallon drum, but they got it done.
Yeah.
It just you gotta understand that they had dedicated people that lived on the trail, that worked the trail, that kept the trail open. They had underground tunnels, they had hospitals, they had munition storage areas, they had gas stations. It was a business. That highway was just like Interstate 35 from San Antonio to Austin. That thing was a business. And when we had our hands tied behind us and we couldn't really hit it, or somebody's trying to say, well, we never are or never were in Cambodia. Well, that's all a bunch of BS, and everybody knows it. But they knew that if they didn't keep the Ho Chi Minh Trail open, they were going to die. and their guys would run out of whatever they were getting. So it was very important. And Terry mentioned that road or that ship coming into the southern part of Cambodia on that map. If you see the black trail coming up, that's exactly how they funnel supplies up to the north and then over onto the trail. So the trail was a vital link to them being as successful as they were. And they did some pretty good work. You got to hand it to them. But they did it all the time. That was their life. You could stay, you go down to work a section of the trail, and there's nobody saying you only got 30 days left and you can go home. It wasn't like that.
You know, let's say, for instance, in today's world, a guy is a heavy equipment operator, bulldozer operator, for instance. He goes to work, he comes home. These guys are living it 24/7. And if you guys fly over and blow up the road, or there's a underwater bridge going across the river and you blow it up, that thing's back in service in a couple of hours, or at least overnight. Because these guys are working, they may not have anything to do for half of the day. See, there's part of the road, and you can see, you can drive a semi down there.
Yeah, you know, and like you said, they had bulldozers. They'd cut the road if they wanted. And usually they stayed pretty much on the road. I mean, they kept the road that they had designated as a road. They kept that road open. And only did they have to go around to make a new bridge or do something like that did the trail really get diverted. There was two guys that were facts in our squadron, John Goldenbaum and John Ralston, that came over. They'd checked out as A-1 pilots, and they came over and they said, hey, well, we're going to close down the A-1s, which was a big mistake. Yeah. But they made them facts. Well, they'd been checked out in the A-1. Well, they started flying facts in Laos and out of NKP, and they were really good. And they knew all about that type of stuff. They worked their sectors and everything. And then we needed more A-1 pilots, so they did an in-country checkout, and all of a sudden they become A-1 pilots. So you think they didn't really know what was going on? Here was a fact that become an A-1 pilot. Now he's back over there bombing the heck out of them. You know, I mean, those guys were really great. They were there when I was there, and it was so wonderful to work with those guys. And two of those guys, the Goldenbaum and Ralston, are in that picture. This picture here of us on the trail, and the other guy there is Cliff Groves, my roommate. So there is Groves and me and Goldenbaum and Ralston. And we just wanted to go back and visit the trail, and that's exactly what we did.
So that photo is the Ho Chi Minh Trail that he was holding up right there, and it looks like people have built houses around it, and it's a normal part of Laotian society now. Yeah, and it's a tourist thing. They don't want to get rid of it because it's a tourist thing. You got a lot of people. And I might just say this. There are two tours companies in Laos, and if anybody's got enough strength left at 70 to 80 years old, it wants to go back and visit, if you contact me, I can set you up with a great tour guy, Chris, that took us on our tour into Laos, and he knows he's been there for years. Wow. He knows all the bomb sites. He knows all the places where they had camps and everything. And it was a great week that we went with Chris on his tour. So that's available if anybody wants to put a group together and come over. That would be amazing. I'm scared of flying over oceans, but God, I'd love to see Vietnam and Laos one time.
Bud, put that last picture up that you had, where I can talk about the different types of the trail.
The big one we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, the one that's got the road, it's got the trail. Yeah, okay. So starting over on the far left side of the screen where you see the majority of the bomb craters, that's the road. That would be the road that the trucks would take. Then if you go over into the center, normally the trail, because of the hills and the valleys, normally the roads would follow the creek. So that right there is a river, a creek, whatever you want to call it. But there's also a roadway, a narrower roadway going right alongside it, which I would think was probably mostly have been used by like the bicycles And those bicycles, they'd load them down with what I've read, up to 200 pounds of gear. And the guy would walk alongside of it. And then where the cursor's at now, that's the footpath. So that's part way up the hill. So you might have a recon team up there on the crest of the hill that's observing, and you could call in the airstrikes, take out the road, but they're going to have it up and running again, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can see from all the bomb craters, that was apparently a pretty well used part of the trail, or they wouldn't have wasted so many bombs.
Tons of B-52 strikes right here.
God, yeah.
And that open patch up here where they bombed it into an open and just shut it down, but it looks like they've reopened it right there.
That probably would have been the first thing that they would have fixed, because that's a choke point. You know.
Well, Mr. Roger, what's it like seeing this? You know, Mr. Terry's talking about the different ones from the ground and how amazing the size and the building process is. What's it like you seeing this over the ground? And then also, like you said, y'all struck it, and then it could probably be built better than ever the next day or a week later.
Well, your bomb damage, you know, you'd get the bomb damage report or assessment, BDA, from the fact, and he might say, hey, you cut the trail, but the next day he goes back out there, and that overnight or whatever, they pushed dirt into the hole or the bomb crater or whatever, or patched it up. But you've got these things like this. The main reason that you see the foot trail that Terry talked about with the bicycles, and then you see another trail and another trail, you knock one out, they can be on the other one with those bicycles, and he's exactly right. I've seen photos of guys pushing bicycles down the trail with a bomb or some kind of munitions,
tubes and rockets
strapped onto the bicycle, and they just pushing it down the road. But you see all the craters going east to west across the top. What I think is your road that Terry talked about here on the far east side that went to the north, and then it turned and it probably went over here between in this valley. That's probably the fact, trying to cut that trail every day. You see those bombs. They weren't placed in there just like that because some A-1 guy wanted to drop a bomb. Those were marked targets, and he was trying to cut that trail right there for some reason. And that's why you see most of the marks there. Now, this is something I was told. I can't confirm it, but there were more bombs dropped in Laos than dropped in all of World War II.
Yeah.
Now, that's a statement. But and I know from flying around, you looking at the bomb craters, and Laos is a little bit bigger than you'd think. You got the PDJ and all the northern part of Laos, but you got the Steel Tiger, which is running north to south, where you had the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And there was some bombs dropped in that little country. And today, when we went over there on our tour, we met with some guys that work for EOD, and they had contracts for 5-10 years. They were over there still digging around. They'll mark off 100 square meters like a football field, and they go in there with detectors trying to dig up all the bombs and the mines and all the rest. So it's an ongoing thing still today to try to clear that country of all the EOD, you know, the bombs that didn't go off.
And the amount of trucks, that's another thing, guys. Y'all asked me about books I'm reading, and this is a hobo pilot, and he actually worked his way up to becoming a Sandy and Search and Rescue, My Secret War by Richard Drury out of NKP. And he's talking about doing some candlelight or candlestick missions to where he's doing 100 truck killer missions at night, and having some very scary incidences about the plane being hit by lightning and Elmo's fire or whatever y'all call it, where lightning would be over the aircraft and he'd be worried that the napalm was going to cook. I mean,
just like Terry and the missions he was running, my hat's off to the Zorros and the guys that flew at night in A1s, because when they're over the target, their lights out, you know, and even their airplanes may have been painted a little differently, dark or anything, but at night the flare is above you, and you're making your run in below the flare so you can see it, and you're trying to be as precise as possible. But man, you talk about some guys that really earned their pay, and that was the guys that were working the trail at night and or any type of a target at night. Tough.
The North Vietnamese trucks, generally speaking, their headlights would be blacked out.
Yeah.
Or they'd ride with no lights. I could sit up at Leghorn at night, and there was a place, let's see, it would have been east of the Broad, directly in front of Leghorn, if you're looking due south, and that road would cross the, what is it, the Docksay River.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you could catch a glimpse on the right kind of sky at night. You could see barely see the light from those blacked out headlights. Now, how a plane up at, I don't know what, 3,000 feet or whatever would see that, I don't know, but
it's tough, you know. Like I said, the FAC works a sector, and that sector might be a half a mile by half a mile, and he works it every day. And the night facts work that sector, and they just get good at bombing and doing things at night. And the night A1 guys, the Zorros, Fireflies, whatever, they got good at working at night. And you had and those C-123 guys kicking those candles out, you know, they hung it out every night, flying up there at 15,000 or 10,000 and dropping those candles, you know. So flares, it's called a candle. The war never stopped, you know. It was 24/7, and like we were saying, Terry was going to go to Japan on his R&R, or he was going to. There's an A1 rolling in to do something.
Yep, that's at Leghorn.
All right. Well, you see.
Well, okay. That hill right there is where I believe this cave was that they rolled the thing in and out. Right about on the left fourth of the screen. Right there. See that darker spot?
Yeah.
You don't get a darker spot like that when the entire mountain is one color and all of a sudden there's a darker spot, unless there's something causing that. And that's where I believed this thing. And then the smoke over on the right there was some fire that came from there, and they dropped some napalm, and that's what's left.
That's a hell of a shot right there.
Well, what he was doing, you notice there's only one of them, and the Spads always flew in pairs. He was trying to draw that gun out, and then the other one was going to be far enough behind him that if a gun came out and started firing, he'd be able to see the muzzle flashes.
Oh,
but I don't think we ever did take that gun out. Yeah,
Y'all could work over the SKYRAIDER. I can't believe the NVA was crazy enough to come out in the open against y'all when y'all had the SKYRAIDERs right there to just come work the area over. I mean, that is...
Well, but you got to remember, too, that the planes didn't fly on like a fixed schedule where, okay, I know that every day at 2 o'clock there's going to be planes coming over, so I want to hide. It's random. I mean, you go out and support a team on the ground that's in trouble and expend all your ordnance, you might be going back, you know, to rearm and refuel. So it's not a fixed schedule. So a lot of it's just random.
Wow. You definitely got some good A1 with them flying in the valley. Heck, there was one at FOB too. I didn't realize there was one strike that close. Wow. Jeez Louise. This has been good. We've got a lot of questions, but we're here at our hour mark. We'll end on this question because we can turn this into for both of y'all. Al was curious, what was your favorite ordnance to drop for Mr. Roger? But I would say for both of you, what was your favorite ordnance to use? Both for you on the ground, Mr. Terry, and for Mr. Roger, what was your favorite to use?
I
Terry, you go
prefer
ahead.
CBU.
You go ahead. Yeah. I would, yeah, he said CBU. That's good. I had such a variety as we talked about. I can throw a lot of rockets. I had two pods with 19 rockets each. So there's 38 rockets, and I had 2 more pods with 7, so there's 14 more rockets. And I had 2 white phosphorus bombs that I could pickle off that would be armed and explode or would crack open once it hits, and they would dribble out white smoke as a marker. Then I had 6 tubes of CBU, and I had 420 Mike, and I had a Su-11 minigun under the left stub that had 1,500 rounds of 7.62. So, you bring a lot of shit to war, and like I said, I know why the FAC love the A1. I know why the MACV-SOG boys like the A1, and I still say, my hat's off to those guys like Terry that were down there taking rounds and doing their thing, because and to our allies, to the Montagnards and everybody else, it was an unbelievable war, and there was a lot of and back to you, Terry. I think they wanted a lot of warm bodies over there fast, but had you been trained in how to bring in airstrikes and a few other things that you, especially your group, MACV-SOG, doing what you did, they learned, lessons learned were they needed to do that. You need to be trained to do what you did.
My wife works down at Fort Leonard Wood here in Missouri, and last week one of the big bosses from back out west from the company was in, and he was a what do they call them? Combat controller.
CCTs.
In today's world, these Air Force combat controllers accompany the Special Forces teams, and they work the airstrikes. Back in our day, we didn't have that. You learned how to work the airstrikes yourself by trial and error. And
you're right. And I'll tell you what, Terry, it's been nice talking to you. I just love your work, and I thank you so much for what you did, and hats off to you. And I wish you and your family a good Christmas. And Bud, I wish you and your folks good. And I thank you, Bud, for what you do for just like this. There's a lot of people that never heard any of this. And, it's been 50 years ago, come full circle.
And everybody knows I got mad love for the A1 pilots over everybody.
That's why I knew as soon as you agreed to talk to a SOG that I knew it had to be Mr. Terry. I knew y'all would get along, and he's been wanting to speak to one of y'all for so long.
Well,
and everybody's already wanting a part 2, of course. So we may have to have y'all back as a pair for a part 2.
Well, I'll try to rake up some better pictures for you that will help you out, and I might wear my MACV-SOG T-shirt the next time in honor of Terry. Yeah, there it is.
You notice I
got
wore
ours
mine
on today.
I wore mine this morning.
Yeah, I hear you, brother.
Yeah.
Well, we can set it. Maybe we can set up a part 2 in January. It looks like this is going to be a quickly become a crowd favorite having you two together. So I want to wish both of y'all a happy Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we can't thank y'all enough, because this is the first time this has ever been done, having a pilot and a SOG man on together. So let's stay in touch, and we'll have y'all back on.
But after you shut it down, stay on, because I got a funny story for you.
Okie dokie. Well, we'll see y'all later.
Raj, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See y'all later.